Good evening. Welcome to the Adventurers Club of Los Angeles. My name is Rich Mayfield, number 1211. I'm your programs chairman and first vice president for the year. We are broadcasting live from the Adventurers Club Los Angeles. Remember to subscribe to our channel, and this is live, so if you have any questions, put them in the comments, and we will get to them in a little Q&A at the end. So tonight I have Pierre Odier, member 988, one of the original gangsters of the Adventurers Club, right? Something like somewhere between 19 and 30 expedition flags, flagged expeditions, not just
members, right?
Many expeditions around the world. A true adventurer for the club and in this world, right?
Oh, I can go now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. That's it.
That's a good introduction.
So Pierre, we're here to talk about how you got started in adventure, how you got that bug, and then we're going to talk about two of your very iconic adventures that you wrote books about, right?
Yeah, those two last books. Here's how the books came about. I published a lot of books on vanishing minorities in the world.
Okay.
And the programs that I gave at the club was always, I was talking about them. I was representing them. And a lot of people said, hey, you know, we need to know about you. And that's not who I am. So I never talked about myself. And that all of a sudden became clear to a lot of people. So, you know, you at least write down your experience.
Right.
Then where do you start? Do you start with the most dangerous expedition or the most valuable one to the society or to the club? And so I started this whole process by writing when I started, which was when I was 18. And I took off to Egypt without my parents' permission. It was a whole bunch of stuff, but anyway, I accomplished it. I did it. So this was my first publication. And at that time, I realized how insignificant an individual is in the total package. So I called it a pebble in the sand. So I'm the pebble, the sand is the rest of the world.
And this is the series.
That's the volume one. Then I decided to do the whole series, Pebble in the Sand, just volume one and so on, with the title of specific expedition. So in those things, in those articles, I talk about me, my experiences, rather than, I do bring in the cultures and whatever, but it's now about me. So I'm laying myself out to talk about these. And the two that came to my mind when I was talking, I think it was your president, and I was just finishing the publication, was Crossing Siberia on foot, and the other one, which is Devil's Island, which is a misnomer, but it's Devil's Island, French Guiana. And so I can proudly say I'm sitting here. God knows how I did it. It's finished and it's there. So that's why you.
Well, that's cool, and that is unique. You know, you spend your life, you know, researching other cultures and writing about them, but at some point, you know, the actual journey is very interesting.
Well, see, this is what I never really. I don't want to say I didn't understand it, because when you're out there starving to death or not making a connection, you think about a lot about yourself or your family or where you came from or what you did. But during that time, and you know, time goes very fast, I wasn't focused on that. And even when I was talking to the club, I was kind of joking. Every single program I gave ended up with a Mickey Mouse image, because I told everybody that anywhere in the world, any city, any village, I will see a Mickey Mouse picture.
Yeah.
And what was beautiful about that, they were not designed by Disney. They were locals making little Disney things and so on. And I thought that fitted in my character of telling the story, that there's an image that is global that represents the local person's interpretation of that. And that's what I do. I go and I look and I interpret people, and then hopefully I have the right stories. You know?
Yeah. So what, like you mentioned the Egypt trip, that was the first time that you went adventuring, so to speak. You were 18 years old.
Yes.
You ran away from home, so to speak. I mean,
well,
you're allowed to run away from home when you're 18.
Well, no, but I raised all my own money, and my mother was in America, and I was living in Germany, and I was back and forth, and 2 weeks before I left, someone stole all my money, and so I had to patch it together. Here's an interesting point. The 2 weeks before I left, I had not yet paid for my planes and all that. So I went to the travel agent, and I told them my plight. They knew that my money was stolen because it was in the news. You know what they said? Don't worry. Pay us when you get back. Pay us whenever. That to me left an impression of the humanity of people helping you get something accomplished,
right.
A wish or a dream. So here's this 18-year-old that is really incredible idea of going to Egypt, and the war was going on, by the way, at that time, the Suez Canal Wall, and they stepped up and said, this guy, we support him.
Yeah.
It was no longer, hey, can you pay? That's something that transcended through all my stories, and you'll see when I talk about Siberia or I talk about French Guiana, there's always somebody somewhere that's helping you out of nowhere.
Right.
And people don't understand how I do that. I don't do it, it just happens. It's just the way it is. And in some very tight positions and tight whatever, it really talks to the sense of humanity, and humanity being interesting in you succeeding. Not that it's for them, but it's for you. So they'll go out the way. Sometimes it was food, sometimes it's transportation, sometimes it's looking the other way when you cross a border without permission or something like that. But it always came down to a drive that I think I experienced when I was 18, and I made it. I tell you a story about 18. I was in Egypt, and the war was going on, and I was getting pretty scared. So I phoned my father up, and I said, hey, Dad. So I'm on the phone. I say, hey, Dad. He says, yeah, how are you? Did you see the pyramid? Yes, Dad, I saw the pyramids. Hey, did you see the museum? Yes, Dad, I saw the museum. Okay, everything, because I was calling him for money to get a ticket to go home, and he hung up on me. I was stranded, I was mad. So when I came back, and I was, I was 18-year punk, actually, and I was all over him. Why do you let me strand? And he says, son, I want to tell you something. You told us that you're going to do it. You figured it out. You planned it. You did it. It's on your back, and that's what you did. And I wasn't going to interfere. And I'm going, oh, okay. And then afterwards, he was running all over, bragging about what I had done and all that. But damn it, I needed that ride home. I needed that flight home. Anyway, so that kind of was to sum up or to put together the interview package of who I am, what I do. At that time, I realized it's your idea. Take responsibility for failure and take responsibility for success.
How long do you think your parents would have left you stranded there? I mean, you called and they
left
said
me. They did.
But how long? I mean, they would have gotten you back eventually, right? They wouldn't have left you there for years.
Well, they would have, because there was no way to communicate with me. I was in some field somewhere. I did have an entry and exit plane ticket for dates. So it was like 2 weeks before I could actually leave. So I just disappeared. I went to Karnak. I went floating around somewhere, doing stuff. And again, somebody took me in their home. Unfortunately, that guy was a gangster because he had stolen the whole museum, and he had this whole house full of all these treasures and stuff, 18th dynasty stuff.
What year was this?
That was actually, it was 1958.
So when he stole the stuff at like the end of the war? When everything was like before
that? Right.
So when everything, World War II was going on, this guy was, he was a looter, right?
Yeah,
he was
exactly.
looting.
And I wanted half the stuff. And I do have some stuff in my collections that he gave me, small things that I could carry, that I could take out. There was a statue of a bird that was beautiful, carved. I mean, 10 years later, I saw it in the Smithsonian, in the museum in New York.
Did it have the story on there? Like it was?
No, because they were buying and selling it. There was the black market or whatever.
Yeah.
But I touched it, and it was great. But the idea was that it was very open and confusing. But the other issue with Egypt, it had so much that you could virtually walk in the desert and pick up stuff. It was such a rich deposit of the culture. Now they're starting to study the prehistory of Egypt and how things happen, not the glamour items. So anyway.
So Egypt kind of got you your bug for travel, and it taught you that you could survive, right?
And
like that's a pretty, like an 18-year-old surviving with no money, and that's pretty impressive. And
I have to hang that on my wall and say that's where it started, because I don't have a choice. But it also got me interested in archaeology, because then I started corresponding with world leaders in Egyptology, and that got me. And then that's when I met Albert Schweitzer and people who are very famous in their thing. And there's this little kid doing stuff, and to finance that trip is really funny when I think about it today. I was giving speeches to the Society on American Jazz, and I was giving the jazz history and showing dance moves. And I'm looking back and I'm going, oh my God, no wonder my parents were all messed up, because I was just. But that's how.
Like, is this kid going to get a real job or what?
Exactly. And unfortunately, both of them passed away long before all of this ended. But the point was, it kind of was the beginning of my eccentric attitude towards getting things done. And I'm very impatient if someone says, and I'm going to digress a little bit, because that carried over when I was teaching. And whatever. So I took a class of students living off the land in Africa for 11 weeks with the natives.
Wow.
I took them to the North Pole. I took them to South America to live in the Tarahumara Indians. And my district thought I was nuts. But
Man, what college let you do that?
that's not a college. It was high school.
What high school? What district let you do that?
Oh my God, I'm retired. It was Hoover High School in Glendale.
Wow.
But the point is, and in the process, I was training with help the kids to take on, like a girl became the doctor and the other one did the books. And all three of these big programs I presented at the Adventurers Club. We had a program where every one of those kids came back with their flag, with their stories on Africa, South America, Yucatan, where we're diving, and presented the club. So my idea was, okay, I'm doing it, but somehow deep in there, I wanted to share it.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that eventually, not eventually, but I don't know what year it was, made me interested in the Adventurers Club. The idea of the camaraderie, of sharing, the idea of having off the wall or stuff that you just don't think, and there it is. And when you look at, for instance, at Kevin Lee's underwater picture of these 1-inch things, you can't bet, but this is a world that opens up because you're in the Adventure Club.
Yeah.
That's what was all about. So these other expeditions at that time when I was an adult, it was very organized and I could budget my money and get the right papers. I didn't have to sneak in or sneak out and all of that kind of stuff. But one of the things that always laid with me, or rested in my mind, is when I was out there and it was crap, it was raining, I was drowning or whatever it is, I can go back to the Adventure Club and I can tell a story, and nobody is going to doubt it. Nobody is going to say that's full of shit.
No, they're not going to shut you down because you didn't bleed, right?
Right, exactly, because they were there. And so all of a sudden, it became part of this, I guess it's a drive, and the frustration is now I've been in my house since February. This is the third time I left, twice for grocery and once to come to the Adventure Club.
Yeah.
That's not my life.
Yeah.
And I'm not 21 anymore, therefore I'm going, hey, wait a minute, the time is clicking, and now my daughters are concerned, don't leave the house because you'll die tomorrow. And you can't get a flight out anywhere because the planes aren't going.
Oh, yeah.
So all of a sudden, it definitely hampered my style.
I mean, the Adventurers Club really is unique in that, right? Because, I don't know, that everybody around here has fascinating stories and wants to hear about it, right? I don't know if you've ever told a story to... We'll call them like normal people, I guess.
Yes.
But like they look at you and they look at you like, what? Why would you do that?
That's true.
And here, nobody looks at you and like, why would you do that?
No.
Everybody's like, that sounds cool.
But here's the good thing. That's the club. But I gave many, many, many programs to outsiders, Kiwanis Club, Civil Club, and so on, for that purpose. But at that time, I don't change the story, but I use it in a way that they can process without having had an adventure or being in the Adventure Club. So therefore, I felt responsible, and those communities are the ones who came out and supported me. When I built a school in Cambodia and I needed funding, they helped me with that because they remember when I gave programs for them. Okay, entertaining, but I was giving the programs, my story was getting out based on exposing them to something that they couldn't have. And some of them I invited to the Adventure Club, and some became really supportive of programs at the club. So it's a two-way streak. It's a give and take, but the club definitely becomes a catalyst for, as they say, off the wall. I mean, we're not here doing a dissertation, a medical report, or documentation. I belong to the Explorers Club, and at that point, it's more scientific, and you have to produce. So the club was really a heaven for guys like me that just went off and did stuff.
Right.
I mean, these are anyway.
So I could ask you why did you go to Siberia, but I'm not going to ask you why.
Well, you
because we
could.
know the answer why is because it's there, right? That's the famous line. Why did you climb that mountain? Because it was there.
No, that's wrong. See, I'm glad you asked that. It looked like I prepped you. No, I climbed that mountain because I was here.
You were here at the Adventurers Club.
Well, or at the bottom of the mountain.
So yeah,
With our words,
you're ready to go.
It's me. Okay.
So I said I wasn't going to ask you the question. The question I want to ask you is what put Siberia on the radar for you? Because that's the question's not why. The why is because it's in front of you and you're going to go and it's there. You know?
Well, a
But
lot of
what
it-
put it on your radar?
There's two things. I had visited Mongolia several times and did some stuff in the Altai Mountains and all of that. But I through research and reading and whatever, my library, I found out that there was a group of people, the Yukagir, there was only 17 of them left. And then if they leave, that tribe, that culture disappears. That caught my attention. Then I started looking at where is it, how is it, whatever, making connections and so on. And then so one year when I decided, okay, I'm going to go and find that tribe. Well, in order to do that, I needed some scientific backing. Now we're getting a little bit into an illegal thing because I went to Moscow, and in order to have access, friends pronounced me a professor at the university, which I wasn't. And so I got to see maps and talk to people. And then I met a guy, Anton, who we bonded, and then we decided that we're going to go there. And I will arrive there, and you'll come from Moscow, and we'll just go find that tribe. And we documented that tribe, and it was really intense, both historical and personal. And we became such good friends. And it all started with, okay, you're Russian, I'm American. We're not talking politics. We're not talking religion. Our objective is that. And it worked out perfect. Even when we were stranded and there was no hope of getting out of there, we were sending emails, not emails, grams.
Telegrams?
Well, it's telegrams, but it's the Russian version of grams, whatever,
Okay.
to get help, and it didn't come and so on. And I was connected to the Adventure Club. We were reporting to the Adventure Club through a shortwave global network, ham operators, and then they would report in. That fell apart. But then I had a girlfriend here who was the recipient, and she would report to the Adventure Club where I was, because the Adventure Club was the ones who were going to pick me up from Alaska and bring me back home with the Bidara to put on the display. That fell through. These two guys flaked out, so they never came and got me. So I had to finagle an emergency telegram through a cruise ship that was going by. We sent an Eskimo with a little boat to the ship, and then he actually telegraphed back here that I'm stranded and blah, 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 and all of that. And that, I put that.
So Siberia was another story of you getting stranded.
Yes.
But you do work yourself out of it.
Well, see,
there
that's
was hope.
Me and others. In other words, you're never alone in these situations. That's the thing that I'm trying to do. You take advantage of what's there. It might be an animal, or it might be a 105-year-old lady, or it might be two kids. Sometimes it's two kids, 6 and 5, and they show you a way and they show you out. When I first went to some of the Gur villages, I was stranded on a hill, didn't know up and down. These two kids were going up, says, oh, we'll take you to the village, and introduced me to the leader. So the motivation, I guess, there's not a word. It's curiosity, it's adventure. I'm not an adventurer for adventure. I'm not going to jump off because I'm the first one who's jumping off. I'm not interested in what you want, the glamour, the fastest or the highest, the longest. I'm interested for the essence of what it is, where it is. Now, that could be plants, it could be animals, it could be people, as long as it's genuine and it's
Right.
not. Also, I'm interested to see the transition from these indigenous peoples' cultures to this inflection of new things. And that's maybe why I'm so intimidated with the technology. I mean, I only have a rotary phone in my house, and people see, they think I'm lying, and you can't, why, how? I have a rotary phone. You can leave a message, but that's it. And I realize there is a transition going on. So these native people in all of these cultures, from Guyana, from Borneo, from wherever I went, or Gabon, their lifestyle or their connection to the environment and thing is diminishing.
Right.
It is interesting that we, with our technology, we're going back there. We're starting the plants that they use for medication for their whatever it is. So there's a reversal. And we can't forget, this is a global community. And the only thing we have going is the fact that we are on this earth with 10 gallons of water. That's it. Now, how we use it and where we do it, that's it. Everything else is a bonus. So to see that, the pleasure of mine is being in those villages with those cultures. Yeah, China, I went there 10 times in the first few years I went. I was put in jail. I was this, because I'm not supposed to be there. It didn't deter me, but it taught me how things evolve. And then my job was, in my mind, to go back to this police station where I was arrested, make friends and drink tea, and let me go up to the mountain. So that becomes kind of my motivation, but it's based on the fact that everything is changing so fast in those areas. And I guess I'm obsessed with documenting it.
So when you started out on the Siberia trip, you started to go document this vanishing tribe with 17 members left.
Right. That was
But
the objective. Yes.
That's not where it ended.
No, that's not where it ended,
Right.
unfortunately. Well,
Unfortunately.
well,
did you want it to end there?
yes, because then I would have been a complete objective.
Right, it would have been neat. It would have been a neat package. You went in there,
And then I could continue research and put it together.
But that's not where you started.
No, because
you started trekking across Russia.
Yes, because the whole thing is predicated on discoveries, and half of it you know about because you studied, and half of it you don't have a clue. When I ran in for,
So when you were there, something else piqued
Exactly,
your interest.
exactly.
So to
Well,
speak. You saw something else that you wanted to go check
it
out.
became the Gulags.
The Gulags. So
That
what
wo-
was the deal with the Gulags?
Well, they were, I don't know how much you know about that, but they make the Holocaust look like a weekend picnic. I mean, the numbers are staggering, and who went there and how many they had and what they had to do. And in Siberia, to keep the Gulags going, that were mining minerals and gold, they had to send in at least 20, 30,000 people a year or a season, because they were all dying. They couldn't survive. So it was a very, very tumultuous time. And the Russians did not really document Siberia. They have the gulags all over the place. But Siberia, it was kind of hush-hush. They were doing human experimentation. They were excavating nuclear material. Gold was the main thing, and Stalin wanted gold and all that. So once I got bitten by that, I wanted to go see the gulag. Well, that wasn't easy. You got to find someone, and I could.
Because you were in Russia under the premise that you were some sort of professor.
Yeah.
And you were doing some research,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
But you were sort of doing research, right?
I was, but you
half-truths,
see,
but you weren't a professor at this college.
well, but the problem is that when you're a professor at this college, you're supposed to turn in your research papers after you're done.
Right.
And it worked out, because my friend who went with me, he's a very high-ranking. He's got like three doctorate degree at 21 PhDs, and he was put on the Russian board to eliminate and help quell international conflict resolutions and stuff. So he was way up there. And the story he told me, the first thing that he told me, he says, I'm really American, because the first girl I had sex with was on the roof of the American embassy. And I said, okay, we're friends. So he had a sense of humor, but it became very serious, because we were in trouble, but it just takes one little guy says, what are you doing here? And then he starts the whole process. We have to arrest you.
Right.
It's not very clear. But I went through about 5 different agencies, KGB, border police, internal police, intelligence police, local police, government official, and got the documents to do that.
To continue on.
To even start. No,
So this was to get to go see the tribe.
Just to go into that area that's totally off limits.
But then when you wanted to go check out the gulags that
I didn't
were
ask
all
for second permission.
So what was that like? I mean, if you got caught, would they have?
Yes, it would have been a problem.
Would have been a problem.
It would have been a problem because, well, it was in that area there was a huge political issue. The governor of that state wanted that state to secede from Russia. So there
The middle of Siberia?
Yeah. Well, because they have all the diamonds, they have all the gold.
Okay.
They're the richest, whatever.
But that's like Kansas trying to secede from the United States. Like, what are we going to do?
What does Kansas have to offer?
Yeah. Assuming Kansas had something to, I mean, we can't throw Kansas under the bus.
No, but the point is,
here.
Russia at that time, with the diamonds and the oil, there was valuable material to bargain in the world, and other countries were involved. So, so then what we did is we went to the governor, and that's what some of the people signing our flags, and we did our routine and whatever. Now, to come back to America, I had prepaid for the natives through contacts to build me a boat to come back.
Which natives?
The Inuits.
Oh, okay.
And so they built me the boat. So
these guys, when did that happen? Because you were checking out the Gulags. Did you already know that you were going to?
Yes. I had to come back to America, yes.
And your plan to get back to America was what?
To cross the Bering Strait.
In what?
In whatever, and it just happens to be a sealskin boat that I got from the natives.
So when did you make that, like when did you come to the conclusion that not only were you going to cross the Bering Strait, but you were going to do it in a sealskin boat? By the way, do we have a picture of this boat?
Oh, yes.
While you're talking.
You have hundreds of pictures.
So
I don't know what he's asking.
He'll go find it.
That's not the boat. That's a boat on the river there.
Yeah.
Well,
when
see,
did
you
the
ask
boat
a
come
question
into
that cannot be answered, because when I first committed to myself in my head that I was going to leave here and come back here, I had to think how I'm going to do it. So I started talking to people and anthropologists and this and that. And somebody had a connection with the Inuits, and is there a way I can get a boat? Is it whatever? And it all fell into place. And I paid for it.
Yeah. So where did you start in Russia on this trip, Andy? Do you have that map too?
I
so
started
there's two pictures I wanted to show. One was a picture of the map.
I started in Mongolia, in Ulaanbaatar.
Okay, here's this. So this is the map of your trip
Ulaanbaatar,
across.
and then I went to all the way across, yeah.
Wow. And how did you cover that distance?
1 foot at a time.
You walked the whole way?
I walked, but if someone drove by with a reindeer sleigh, I got on it.
So you hitchhiked in everything?
Everything.
A reindeer sleigh?
Yeah.
And back of trucks, I imagine?
Or even boats that were moving materials up the river. I was to go there, but the boat went there, so I said, okay, let's go there and then go that. And in some areas, we were stranded, and that's how I got to be taken out of that area on these Russian bombers who were...
So a bomber? How did you get on a Russian bomber? They let an American on a Russian bomber? What year was this?
Well, they didn't know who I was, but the point is they were there, which I found out later, to remove toxic material from that particular region. Smitter is the place. And then they were going to go there and take us south.
Toxic material, like radioactive?
Right, in barrels. That was their mission. That was a military mission, I guess.
And you hopped a ride on this plane?
Yes. We were stranded there, and there was a barrack, which was an old airport facilities. And one of the pilots of one of the planes who was going the other way was also waiting for a ride going this way, and he was in the same building. And we made friends, and he said, well, I know the pilot of this, and we can get you on that plane, and so on.
Was there nuclear material on that plane when you were flying on it?
Yes, they were in barrels.
And I mean, how did they not know you're American? I mean, I guess you have the French accent, right?
No.
Do we have a picture of Pierre in that airplane, in the cockpit?
Well, it's a converted story because, I did wear a Russian overcoat, and I was told, just shut up, go in the back and curl up in the corner, don't talk.
So they gave you a Russian uniform, and they threw on the plane.
Right. Well, the pilot was already starting to drink.
Is that you?
Yeah, that's me.
Is that you flying the plane?
Yes, that's me.
So you were flying a Russian bomber that had nuclear material on it.
Yes, but
and you were not really supposed to be in Russia doing whatever the hell you were doing in Russia at the time.
Let me tell you how the story went. In order to with my guide, we were there, and the pilot obviously said, "Hey, does your friend fly?" And what he meant, can he handle the altitude?
Is he a pilot?
No. Can he handle the altitude is what I thought he was asking. And so my friend said, yeah, he can fly. Well, the captain, the pilot decided, oh, okay, if he can fly a plane, I can go take a vodka in the back and take a pee or whatever, and I'll let him fly the plane. And I swear to God, and next thing, he's there, he gives me the headset, and he says, here, sit. And I'm looking at this panel, and there's one device, don't ask me the technical question, but it's like this. And I said to myself, that needle is not going to move a milli-inch. And I was frozen in that seat, holding on to these things. Well, the result was I was flying straight where I was supposed to have made a right. Oh, it was a long story. But anyway, so I told my friend...
I don't think that's on you. I think that might be on the pilot drinking vodka in the back.
But okay, I'm not criticizing because that is how it is over there. That life is not like here. The pilot was probably pissed that he had to fly that stuff.
Yeah.
He was this. And one thing led to the other. So he didn't question it. Okay, I'll take you, no problem. Because my guide was very clever. He was a very intelligent person, so I don't know what he told him. I don't think he told him I was American. I think I told him that I was a student, institute student in anthropology and whatever he told him. He never told me. I didn't want to know, because once you know, then you have to balance off if you question. But anyway, and there was the other image where we landed, and the secret police picked us up in a helicopter to go further because nobody was supposed to. Yes, yeah, that's the yes, that's the helicopter, my friend.
So the secret police picked you up in this helicopter?
Everything there is secret. So when I say everything there is secret, and when I was stranded there for 2 weeks in this isolated post that was designed and built against America as a defensive position against America, everything was under barbed wire. But there was one guy there who says he was doing scientific experiment for wind for environmental thing. Okay, but the thing for him, he had food. So after a week, we had no food. He started sharing it with us, and we started talking, and he's bored as hell. So eventually, he showed me the machine with the film, and I have a piece of that film, and whatever they were doing, it worked. But anyway, so in order to leave Russia, I had to have a permit to leave. So he somehow made connection with Anadri, which is where the military border police are, to fly this guy out and then look at my papers. However, the weather was such that no helicopters could fly. So finally, that helicopter came, we dropped him off, and this guy was already drunk on his butt, and we signed the papers here and this and that, and all he says, "Hey, are you smuggling any ivory?" And I said, "Well, I got 2 horns." And that cracked them up. No, I don't know. It just happened that because the ivory comes from the reindeer.
So they didn't ask, like they're looking at your exit paperwork and it says
There's
like
no
American.
exit paperwork. I didn't. I just had entry permit. I did, because normally on the big condition, I was supposed to fly back to civilization, to Moscow
Right,
or Anadri.
but you're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
So this helicopter flies you out.
Flies me out and lands in Uelen. And now I'm making connection with all the natives and that special agent who's looking at the weather. And we survived there. The one interesting thing is these are Inuits, and they all deal with dogs and survival. And for the first time in 15 years, they caught a whale. And so the whole village focused on that whale. I was documenting that. It was just great. It was just great.
Like breaking it down, you know, getting the oil and rendering the fat and all the stuff.
Well, it's more complicated than that,
Sure.
I found out. Because each segment belongs to someone. This belongs to the chief. This belongs to this. And so when they're cutting it up, it all gets divvied up. Huh. And one big chunk of it was put in a cart. And I said, "Who does it belong to?" He said, "That belongs to our dogs." So they were feeding the dogs that were...
Is that them breaking down the whale right here, this picture?
I can't see it from
It
yes,
sure looks
yeah,
like
on the
it.
far, in the bottom right. Yeah, yes,
Wow.
absolutely. That's exactly what they were doing. And the bond and the connection was...
And then here's the dog.
That's the dog. And there was
The
wild...
happiest dog on earth, right?
Well, and he's wild because he was kicked out of the herd because they're all chained up. They have all, like the sled dogs, you know, that belong. That dog, that's another sad story. I became friends with him.
Because you were stranded in this...
Yes.
Why were you stranded there?
I couldn't, there was no boat going out, there was nothing happening.
But weren't they building you a boat?
Yeah, but I didn't have the permission. I didn't have the permit. So this guy had to fly in and snap my permission to leave.
Well, if some guy had to fly in to stamp your permit,
Right.
who was going to check it if you took off?
They would check it when I land.
Isn't it America on the other side?
Well, there is, but the Americans know where you're coming from. If they see you paddling a boat from Russia, they're going to check you out.
But they're going to check your
It's
Russian permit?
They're going to, well...
Oh, you got your passport, right?
Yeah, but okay, all right. So hold on.
Can't you say, they kidnapped me and put me on a bomber with a bunch of nuclear material, you got to let me back?
we were in Little Dimity. And in Little Dimity, that's when I was in contact with the Adventure Club. That's when we were packing up or getting the Baidara ready to be put on a plane to take home. Didn't happen. So here I am. The sad story is that when we left Ellen, there were two of us, two boats. The one boat sank and everybody died because the ice blocks were coming in.
Jeez.
If you could
So
see,
like you have a picture of the
ice.
boat. Keep going.
No,
Andy.
we have a picture of, yeah, there's the ice. And my guide, he gets on the ice, says, well, let's just walk to America. It was
So that's
fun.
what you're going through that ice pack in a sealskin boat.
Yes.
Wow.
Which is half the size of the skin of the seal because they fillet it to make it. Anyway, that's a whole. There you go. There you go. You can see there.
This is the skin.
Yeah, that's the
tanned.
skin where he was filleting it. I documented the whole process.
And this is the inside of the boat. This is up on the stilts.
Yes.
And
Drying.
The boat that sank, was that a sealskin boat as well?
No, it was wood, but the motor was going through the boat, and that's the motor sank. That's what I understand. I don't know the detail. Anyway.
So do you have a wide picture of this sealskin boat?
Yes, on the barrel. There
it
is
on the
on
barrels.
the barrel. There you go. Yeah.
That boat. So how far was this crossing?
Well, it took us 12 hours because of the currents and all sorts of stuff.
And you had a motor on this? Or
No.
Paddling?
Paddling, yeah. And we had an outboard, what they call, it's like on a long rod. It's just a Mickey Mouse, a one banger, I would call it, kind of thing. And so when we arrived at Little Dimity, the other boat didn't come, the other boat didn't come. So in that sense, it was good that the Adventure Club didn't come because I then gave my boat to these guys to go back to Russia. To go back to Russia. And
so the plan was, the plan was two boats were going to make it across.
Right.
And the guys in your boat were going to get back in the other boat and go back, transit back the guys.
Exactly.
And then the Adventurers Club was
supposed to pick us up.
Well, some guys, not the club, I'm sure, but some guys in the club who will remain nameless were supposed to fly up there.
The ones who talk a lot about their flying abilities, yes.
Yeah.
I
won't
mention names.
They were going to bring a plane up.
They had a plane, and they were going to convert that twin-engine plane and take the seats out and put extra gas barrels in there so that we could put the boat on and come back.
Yeah.
That didn't happen.
Well, the plane probably broke. If there's anything I've learned about the Adventurers Club is every flying story here revolves around something broken.
Like,
I'll tell you what, like every prop on the wall,
we got
an ejection seat, we got the broken props, like
exactly.
It's not an Adventurers Club aviation. Like how we say, when did you bleed? Right? Or that's not an adventure.
Exactly. No.
The question is aviation. It's like if someone's telling a flying story, it's like, get to the crash.
Like Bernie who crashed and there's the plane. Yeah.
So I mean, the plane probably broke. To be fair,
I don't care about that because they made the excuse, and when I contacted them by phone from up there, it didn't happen. But that's a negative part of the story, which I don't even want to get into because they could have been up there. There's many planes in a club, but whatever.
I'll tell you, it's interesting. I'll tell you one of my little stories. I've done treks, and then I've had a bike, and then I wanted to ditch the bike and continue on foot, right? And every time, like I'd go to a bike shop, and I'd have them pack it up and mail it home. 3 bikes. Every single one has gotten lost.
That's the story.
And they've either stolen it. I'm pretty sure the bike shop just stole it in every case.
They took it for parts, yeah.
Yeah, but I swear to God, like 3 bikes. I'm like, ship it back. I want this bike. I spent a lot of time on this.
Yeah, but
all of them have been lost.
So now we're on Little Dimity.
Yeah.
I'm with my Russian guide. Now what? Since we don't have a boat anymore, so we couldn't make that last 4 mile from Little Dimity to mainland. So we're sitting there for about 3 days, and that's when I was communicating with the club, and nothing happened. And
where was this picture? Is this you crossing the ice?
Oh, that's my friend making fun of me. That's my guide saying, we'll walk to America.
So you got 4 miles to go, and he's like, oh.
No, that's the Russian. We're on the Russian
So he just
side.
wants to like hop from iceberg to iceberg.
He was joking. But
that was the joke,
We
right?
were so desperate and so frustrated after 3 or 4 weeks with no food, just eating some grass and stuff, and a bouillon cube that I still have today. That was where all of a sudden you realize crap hit the fan, But anyway.
And what kind of communications did you have going on? You had like
nothing.
A short wave.
No, that finished.
So how'd you get off this island?
I was just getting to that. We were there 3 days with the natives, and they were really good. Now, one of the things that the Russians could do, they could bring in carved ivory, and they could go to the store and buy diapers and knives and food and stuff. So that was a moment where it was fun, and I got a few of those pieces for my collection because whatever. Now, that island, a Little Diamond, was stranded for 4 weeks because of weather. They had no supplies. So that I found out when they couldn't buy diapers and Similac or whatever they wanted for the babies to take back to Russia. All of a sudden, the weather cleared, and the guy said, "Oh, our helicopter's coming in today with the supplies." So I talked to Anton. I said, "Anton, we're going to be on a helicopter, but I'm not going to fly the damn thing." We joked about it. Anyway, the helicopter came in, and so what we did, we decided immediately, we were there, we were unloading everything. We were total laborers unloading. And then the pilot says, "Well, who are you?" And then we explained the story and so on. And I says, "Well, we unloaded your whole thing. Is there a way you could drop us off at the mainland? We don't care where."
You're really putting him in a spot, huh?
Yeah. So he said, yes, okay. The biggest issue came up is that the front seat, we had to be on the back hanging on to the netting because the front seat was reserved for a criminal that he was taking from the island to the mainland to go to court. He killed someone. And the moment we were there, he turned around. It's funny how things go. He turned around and says, "Oh, I won't kill those two," And the pilot says, "You better not." He was in handcuffs. But anyway, so we land in Canada, in America, somewhere up there. And he said, "Now you get out." So now we knew we were on mainland. We said, okay. So we're standing there, we're looking at you with our backpack, looking like crap, haven't had a shower for a month.
He didn't drop you in a town? He just dropped you like on the mainland?
On the mainland. We agreed. We said, we don't want, just drop us off. Now, all of that area there belongs or is occupied by Native Americans, Inuits. And they have their own way of communicating. They have planes flying in, they have trucks going by with supplies and so on. So this truck comes by, and obviously, what the hell are you doing there? He took us to the 5 buildings, and that building had radio communication because they were in charge of that particular area, the old guy and the kids, and everybody was climbing over everybody. And he said, "Yeah, we have a plane coming in to bring us supplies and so on." So we made a deal with the pilot. We paid him $50, and he took us both out. Now he's flying out into the ocean, and I said, "Why are you flying in the ocean? We want to go on the mainland." He says, "We can't fly there. There's a huge storm, and I only have 1 inch." And my friend said, "What are you doing?" Anyway, so we landed on land. We landed in, not Anchorage, we landed in, I forget where it was. I do know, but I forget. And we're there, and we say, "Okay, thank you very much for the ride. Now what?" So now we had to get to Fairbanks. We had to get to the main airport because he has to go back to Russia.
Right.
So it's Sunday, and I'm talking to the lady there because we landed in a commercial place where they deliver stuff and all that. I says, "Now what?" She said, "Well," I said, "Well, the biggest problem I have, we're here illegally. We don't have entry, nothing. My Russian friend, whatever."
Yeah, I was going to ask, when is the first time you had contact with a customs official or whatever?
Right there. The girl says, "Yeah, my uncle, he's a border police or whatever it is." So she calls him up, and he was at a birthday party already after, and this truck comes barreling in there, one of these big mother truck. He gets out, and he says, where are the guys who messed up my party, or something to the girl.
Yeah.
And she points to the corner where we were sitting, which was great because we had tea, we had candy bars, it was just heaven. And he comes over, he says, "All right, what's the matter here? What do you need?" She says, "They just came from Russia." And he says, "I'm not drunk enough to listen to that story. Nobody comes from Russia."
Jeez.
And so anyway, he finally explained it, and we made a deal. And I says, "Okay, his passport needs to be stamped so that he can leave." And he did. And then I handed my passport, and he says, "Well, you're an American. You don't need it." I said, "Okay, fine." So that's how we got in. So we went to Anchorage. I put him on a plane back to Russia, and then I did a credit card flight to Burbank.
Wow.
Because my planes didn't come to pick me up. Thank God I had a credit card because I charged it all. Anyway, so that was the whole experience. But the whole idea of that then finally boiled down to it works. You can make it happen.
Yeah.
You're not going to die. And in the book, one of my prize images is the telegram I sent from this boat which cruising by to the Adventure Club saying, "We're stranded, don't worry, I'll get out of it." And I can see the guys here saying, he'll be back, you know. And that's kind of the attitude that I got, which is okay. It becomes not an obsession, but it becomes a reality. And now I'm here to tell the story, and everybody says, "You're crazy. You never did that." That's their problem, because I did. You know what I'm saying?
You know, I think about that. It's like, seems perfectly plausible to me. Like everything there. Like I don't think you're BSing.
No, because you're in the club.
Yeah.
That's why.
Well, the other thing is I've been across borders like that where you're always surprised at the lack. I've been through JFK and LAX, and it's a very tight border. You know, nobody's getting through. But then you walk out into the woods a little bit, and it's a completely different story.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, where do I go to check in to America or whatever? Or where do I go to check in? They're like, oh, I think the guy's at lunch. Go get some food and then come back.
I don't seek that. I don't try to do that but it always happens to be that maybe that's the opening, that's the window for you to make your move and split and do stuff.
It could be, right? I've always thought about that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess that's what happens when you travel off the beaten path, right?
Especially in countries that are not really controlled.
Right.
Like Gabon and Africa, I mean, they don't see tourists. They don't. What are you doing here?
But if you do hit a checkpoint, it might be trouble.
I've hit many. I'm not, because we don't have enough time to tell the whole story. But there was a point where the policemen were offered and made drunk, so that the natives could smuggle me out to the other village. So because they knew they were going to arrest me there.
So let's talk about the other, very cold trip that you just took, lots of ice and everything.
You want to talk French Guiana?
Let's talk French Guiana, because that's another hard place to get into. Devil's Island, known colloquially.
When I first went there, it was so open that I could actually walk up to a place which they told me, this is where we launch our missiles. And I'm going, whoa, because the Europeans had their missile site in the French Guiana. And there was no security, no borders. And I remember Mark Weitz, who went to French Guiana, told a story. He says, I was standing in front, I couldn't get close or whatever. It was all bordered, it was fenced, it was secure, and it was all of that. And the only thing bad about that for me is that because they were launching foreign missiles, even American, because we had a problem at one time, and so they launched our missile. But the foreigners were from Saudi Arabia and these rich countries and so on. And so when they came to see their departure, they wanted hotels and women and everything else. So it did, this third time I went there, it changed the dynamics of that particular area because of the missiles. But when I first went there, it was just wide open. And
what about the prison island itself?
Well, the prison island, first of all, there's no prisoners.
When did they shut down?
For 45. What's left, 1945, what's left there are the buildings. And in some areas, like in Saint Laurent, these huge settlement of buildings are now occupied by squatters, usually blacks who were from slaves, who came from Suriname or whatever, and they just settled and whatever. And it's a different thing. But anyway, I was doing the research because I'd done a lot of research of what building is what, wherever, whatever.
This is on the actual prison island. What's the prison island?
No, that's on land. The land is the prison. There's 3 islands out there. One's Royale, Devil's Island, and St. Joseph. Now, Royale is the bigger of the islands. And in the early days, that's where some missionaries settled and did a hospital, because it's removed from the mainland, the mosquitoes and all of that kind of stuff.
So they could quarantine out there. Was that the idea?
Yeah. Well, yes and no, because it becomes very sketchy as when it became a hospital or when it became just whatever. The Devil's Island was nothing until they used it for a prisoner. And Royale was an island that became an island where they put all the prisoners they felt were insane. It was the crazy people. But in the latest years, when there were no prisoners, that island became the recreational island for the French Foreign Legion. And that's who took me to that island. With the French Foreign Legion, I went to that island. But what I did, I measured every single building with a yardstick, all the 150 cells, the isolation cells where they were all there, and it's just open. Anyway, you'd have to look at the book to see all of that. But the point is, so then my research started on just about anything that related to that penal colony. But why I wanted to go to Devil's Island, because nobody could go on there. And it was very relevant in terms of global history. The only prisoner that was on there that was anything was Dreyfus, which is a Jewish general from the French army who was accused of spying and sent to Devil's Island.
He was accused of spying, so it was
Yes.
like a political hit job, so to speak?
Absolutely. And many years later, 8, 9 years later, they found out that he was innocent and brought him back home. But in the meantime, it brought on the biggest anti-Semitic movement in France. And this, again, this is another time you have to read the book, because
Yeah.
I went to the extent of documenting who's supporting whom and what. It was a fiasco.
But you can't get, as a tourist, I can't get on the
There's
island.
no tourists, no.
So how'd you get on, what did you do? Because you were doing legitimate research, right?
Well, they don't know that.
Yeah.
I say that, but when they started seeing me sweating and tripping through the woods and taking pictures and documenting this and all of that, they finally thought that I wasn't just there to sunbathe. So that worked to my advantage. Plus, I speak French, so I could kind of get involved with that. So
Right.
the Devil's Island, I was obsessed of going there. So the first time I went to Devil's Island, I'm sitting in Royale, and there's kind of a place, a bar and tables, and they're drinking and all that. And there's a guy there who flies a pilot who flies helicopter. And not mentioning Devil's Island, he said, do you want to fly over these 3 islands and take pictures? I said, yeah, I did. Then I said, what about Devil's Island? Oh, no. Making a long story short, no money involved, but long story short, he said, I'll tell you what, I'll drop you off on there. Okay, so he brings the airplane and he flies in a certain way, and on one side of the island, because it's treacherous, you can't go there, there's rocks, you can't land a boat, there's current, and he just puts the pontoons down. I says, okay, get out, get out, get out. So I'm stepping out. He says, okay, I'll pick you back up. Okay.
So this is a totally off the books trip.
Oh, there's no books involved. There's never any books with me. That's the problem.
Now, what would happen if you tried to take a boat there or swim there?
You can't.
But would the Coast Guard come and get you, or
No,
what?
the currents, and there's no place to land. There's big boulders and rocks.
So they had like some sort of pier or something to get people out there when it was inhabited,
No.
right? So how did they get there when it was inhabited?
Pulley system.
A pulley system?
Pulley system.
Like,
Anyway,
like a gondola
Yeah.
between islands?
yes. And that's how they brought the food, and that's how they got them. And I documented all of that. I found
Wow.
the remnants. So he leaves me there, and now I'm going crazy. I'm documenting all the buildings that had no roof. They were all decaying and everything like that. But I wanted to find Dreyfus' house. I found it, documented, I measured it, and all of that kind of stuff. Having a good time. I walked to the other side of the island, where apparently he had built with rocks like a bench where he could look towards France and all that. It's very complicated, because they thought for sure that the island was going to be invaded, and they were going to rescue him because he's a political prisoner and all that. But anyway, so I'm saying, okay, so it's 4 and 5 in the afternoon. I'll go back to where the helicopter left me off, and there ain't no helicopter. Okay, what the hell? So I looked at one of the buildings there that cleaned it out a little bit, coconut things, and okay, I stayed there all night. Next day, shit, what's going on? So finally he came. And I said, nothing. I said, thank you for picking me up. He said, well, I'm very sorry. One of the person who was on the St. George, which is the French Foreign Legion, they had a fight, they pissed off, and one guy opened the head of the other guy, and I had to fly him back to Cayenne to the main hospital to take care of him, so I couldn't pick you up. Okay. So he says, now remember, I'm investigating everything, so that's just one part of that. He says, when you come back next year, you can have me and my helicopter, we'll go anywhere and do anything. Well, that prompted me to come back the next year. So I came back the next year, and I'm sitting there waiting. We had a rendezvous. He was flying out of Suriname with medical emergency, crashed in a jungle, burnt up. That was the end of him.
Jeez.
That was it. And all the headlines and all that. So I'm going, okay, now I'm here, and what am I going to do? Then I decided to really be anal and investigate. I went all the way up to Suriname. I crossed into Suriname. anyway, it took on a different tone because at that time I was just going to document some of the remote prison buildings which were in the jungle. That time I discovered the Hmongs. The Hmongs were the same that you have here. They went to France. They couldn't do anything in France, so France gave them land in French Guiana, and they started growing vegetable and became very profitable and had a huge concern going, and it was really good. So then I went to investigate them, and I lived with them for a week, documented them and all that kind of stuff, which is not what I had in mind at first, but that's okay. Then I started. Now, when I investigated these cells, I would be so anal that I would look for scratches and names and all that, so I documented all that. And in one cell, there was 4 cells where they're condemned for death. If they're not, that means they're going to be killed. Mm-hmm. So I knew how the bed was located, and I thought, okay, if you're laying there, what the hell, you're going to scratch the walls? So I documented a whole bunch of pictures which are in there where they were drawing of the guards flipping them off, and just incredible stuff. Now that survived because they made it with pencil, and lead survived the humidity and but photographing it in a 4x4 cell with no lights or anything, you can't use flash, you can't do anything. So what I did, I put the camera in one hand and I used a flashlight, and I opened the camera and did, okay, I got some images, they're not the best, but I do have them. So it became a challenge. So then when I came back home, I thought, man, I was teaching photography, so I talked to one guy, a friend of mine. I says, I'll take you to French Guiana, I'll take you there, but your job is to bring all your photo skills to photograph these 2 walls for me. That's it. I'll pay you a trip. I'll do all of that. That's how obsessive I was. He went, he did all of that, came back, had a fight with his wife, and his wife threw all of his images out. So that was the end of that. Yeah.
So you mentioned that these guys were on death row. What was it? It seems like that's a long way to send some people to die.
Well, that was the French. There was many different crimes that they had committed. The one that I will tell you about, just to tie it together, was there was a Napoleon III wasn't liked by the Italians and the Corsicans because Italy and France were really at each other's throat. So there was an assassination attempt on Napoleon III, and they caught the 3 guys who they put a bomb under his coach or whatever it is. They immediately guillotined 2 of them. The 3rd one they didn't. The 4th one they didn't guillotine because the woman of the guy was going to liked him or something. Okay, so what do we do? So what did they do as a punishment? They didn't kill him. They sent him to French Guiana. Okay, and when he came to French Guiana, he did all sorts of stuff, and he made his way back to Europe where he was going to sell his story. He couldn't sell his story. I'm making it very brief because it's longer than that. And then finally he ended up coming back to America, didn't know what to do, but he was a swashbuckling kind of guy, joined the military, was the first on the 1st Black Brigade. Then he became on Custer's thing, went to the Custer battle. Everybody died and he survived. And then he came and died in L.A. Now that's a hell of a story.
Yeah.
And and I found his grave and everything like that. So those are kind of the stories. The other one that I'll mention is Rene Benoit, because he escaped. And he finally, there's a long story, but he escaped and he wrote some books and so on, and he was a member of the Adventurers Club. And the Adventure Club members with lawyers and anything.
This was a member of Adventurers Club of Los Angeles.
Here.
Yeah,
and
he spent time on Devil's Island.
He was not on Devil's Island, in French Guiana. You gotta be clear that the Devil's Island is separate.
A small part of the overall prison complex, right?
We don't have any slides up there, but the point.
Andy, do you have this guy's membership picture?
Looking for it now. Rene Benoit, right?
Yeah. Rene Benoit.
Fantastic.
And so a lawyer here and some people politically, they finally got it, and he became a citizen and all of that. And that was due to the Adventure Club.
Now, did you say earlier that he escaped?
He escaped. Oh, he escaped.
How did he escape? Do you know?
Yeah, he escaped on a boat with 5 guys. They died. He went to Venezuela, and he lived with the natives, and he finally made his way up all the way South America, all the way up to America.
Yeah.
And came in illegally and this and that and the other thing. And so he was quite a character.
Quite a character indeed.
But he had a story to tell, and he wrote 2 books, major books, back actually, Drei Guillotine. And this is where all of a sudden the roads started to cross. And then, now, talking about the Adventure Club, when I heard this, I was digging through the whole place. I did find minimal reference. I found his application and a few of the letters that were sent in support of him as a character to become a citizen. And everything else is gone. I'm going, that can't be, but it is.
Well, I think we have most of the membership records.
Well, you have all the ones that I put in there.
I think Andy's got a picture that he's working on right now.
Working on right now. Give
Well,
me
if he finds
a
it,
minute or
that's
two,
great.
guys.
Yeah.
Then you can thank
that.
Pierre
That's
for
phenomenal.
it, because Pierre is the one who put it in there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, so that became an adventure with a very personal purpose. And again, I went alone, except for that one guy where I paid to take the pictures. But you know, okay, so I found out about these guys, but I found hundreds of numbers and names that I could take my rest of my life to follow up, to family names. Why are they here? Who are they? Who? I found out the name of the guy who's cutting the heads off in Saint Laurent. There was 2. Okay, there's 2 guillotines. The one that's admitted by France is the one in Saint Laurent. They did it in the main plaza, and that's where they did it. I heard rumors that they had a guillotine on Ile Royale. Oh, no. So I went and I checked, and I took positions in a cell and looked up, because the guy said, when I looked out before I was killed, I was looking at whatever, the tree and this, and I recreated, and I found the place where the guillotine had to be placed. They had to have 5 different cement or brick things to put the platform on. I dug it up and I took pictures of it. I covered it up again.
Wow.
But so I found it. So yes, they had a guillotine on on St. George.
And again, would this be used as like a punitive type thing? Because
to kill you, that's it.
Yeah, I get it. But like, why would you send someone all the way to French Guiana just to kill him?
Well, they kill him because on French Guiana, they killed him because he violated everything in French Guiana.
So they were there for something else, but then they were just unruly prisoners or whatever. And
See, when you were condemned to French Guiana, let's say you were condemned in the courts for 10 years, and you were sent to French Guiana, you had to serve 20 years. 10 years in confinement and 10 years as a libéré, free. But what were you going to do? You didn't have money to go back anywhere. You had to find a job. What are you going to do? There's no job, nothing. So that some of them committed crimes to become back prisoners so they would get fed.
So they just like kick you out of the prison? And,
yes.
But at the end of that 20 years, there wasn't like a boat ticket back to France for you, was there?
No. And none of them went back. That's not true. There was a Salvation Army came in under Farger-Perron who organized bringing some of these libérés back to France.
Because it was pretty controversial in France, right?
Yes.
The whole complex.
Yes. Yeah, it was. I don't know how to explain it, because when I wrote the definitive book on Alcatraz too, I think you know I did that, and that's when a lot of my awareness came up, because I also talked about the Native American occupation of the island, and the this and the this, and Al Capone, and all of these historical figures, and it all ties it together. So my next, if I ever finish all my things, I want to do something on defining solitary confinement within those prisons.
So check out what we just found here.
What did we?
That's the man right there.
Yep, that's him. Yep.
So that guy was sentenced down there, escaped. How long was he down there before he?
9 years.
9 years, and then he effected his escape, snuck in the United States, become a member of the Adventurers Club. That's a short story.
In this book, I single them all out. So you will find a page in there that deals just with him. You will find a page in there that just deals with Papillon, which is the biggest fake thing, but everybody knows Papillon because he made a movie and a story about. This is Dreyfus. You'll find out about Dreyfus. And all of a sudden, you realize that these characters are kind of here's Dreyfus in the prison, you find out that they disappear from history. So my obsession was to collect information. Unfortunately for Benoit, there was very little. I did find a relative of one of his wives, and she was just terrible. She didn't want to release anything, and she sold everything to France, all his papers and everything. But anyway, so that's
fascinating.
That's another story. Now I see it.
I don't think you would say, well, hey, these people have been lost to history, right? But they are immortalized in a certain way because they did live in one of the most infamous prisons, right? Like Alcatraz and Devil's Island or French Guiana are some of the most infamous prisons in history.
And but you see, I'm going back to Alcatraz now. A lot of the stories became public and they became bullshit. Mm-hmm. So the true essence of right now, someone said, one of the Ernst brothers who escaped in '43, he finally wrote a letter. And I'm telling you, no, they drowned there because if someone really successfully escaped Alcatraz, he can find sanctuary anywhere in the world and become a millionaire on the story.
Right.
Of an inside story. And their ego is that way. Those people, egos was, even when Al Capone was there and all of the mop with the wop with the mop, these names they carried out and they carried to the outside. But these prisoners, and today too in a modern prison, it's all one-upsman thing.
Yeah.
I have a bigger body than you, or I have, I'm gay, therefore I have 4 boyfriends or whatever. So it's an indigenous world that lives on who they can say they are. So if they manage to escape Alcatraz after 13 attempts that didn't work, they would write. They would tell.
They got some street cred at that point.
Oh man, they could. Yeah, the one that I interviewed several of them actually. One was the only Native American who was there. Was in 1946. He was on the riot, and they killed all the people, and he was the only one who was not sent to death. He was crazy. He was let out. I located him in San Francisco and discussed things with him, and he even said that he got a postcard from one of these guys. I said, "Oh, great. Can I see it?" Well, whatever.
Yeah.
And I followed him all the way when he went to Oklahoma, and he was gay and was half blind, and it was in a bar, and he was beaten to death. So he got out and he was relieved. But all of a sudden, these stories, fine. The other guy, that's an interesting story. The other guy that I corresponded with for a long, long time had an escape on Alcatraz, and when he escaped on Alcatraz, tried to escape. They caught him. His friend died. In that attempt, he tied someone to a tree.
A guard?
A guard,
yeah.
Right. Okay. So anyway, I'm corresponding with him. He's in a penitentiary now. And I had a huge system involved with question and answer that I would broadly send out to people, all this. So I said, with him, I said, all of a sudden, in this middle of the correspondence, I get this feeling, sometimes it's feelings that I want to tell you something, but I can't. Okay, what did that mean? I immediately picked up on that. I says, okay, the law says if you're a prisoner and you get a letter from a lawyer, the guards cannot open it.
Correct.
They can't open it.
That doesn't mean they don't.
Well,
but that is legally correct.
That is the legal aspect. All right, so I didn't hire a lawyer. I didn't pay him, but I made a friend in my circles, a lawyer. So would you do me a favor? Would you send your letterhead and your letter to this guy and say something? Clyde Johnson is his name. Long story. Funny. I finally found out that he went to the high school I taught.
Anyway. Wow.
But anyway, so he was a bank robber and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, he immediately picked up, because these people who are in confinement, they're very savvy. They have a sensitivity. I mean, they could pick up a fly on the other wall.
Yeah.
They just know. So he immediately picked up and he sent me a letter back, immediately saying, well, the thing I couldn't tell you is that the guy that I tied up as a guard, he's the prison warden of my prison now. So I said, another clue.
I mean, does he have a rapport with that warden, or is it just not a good situation for him?
I didn't ask. You didn't want to ask, because that goes back. But what I did, I drafted a letter and I sent it to 12 wardens, knowing that that 11 had nothing to do with Alcatraz, but this guy did. 12 wardens, like, general question, during your time, have you ever served on Alcatraz? Do you know anybody who served on Alcatraz? Blah, blah, blah. And then it finally got to that guy that was the warden of that prison. And in his bliss, or not ignorance, didn't know why, he says, yeah, I served on. And then I said, well, can I correspond with you? And he, yeah, sure. So I corresponded, and when I asked, was there anything special that ever happened to you on Alcatraz? No, nothing. So he didn't say that he was tied to the tree. So, and then I also asked, I said, do you know any prisoners who survived that are in other prisons or so? Nothing. So he didn't say that he knew this guy.
He's got to know.
Yeah, but he
has to know.
Of course.
There's no way you forget that.
No.
Anything weird happen? No, nothing. It
Yeah.
was completely unremarkable. Did you
But
ever
that's
get
what
tied
you
up to a tree? Oh, yeah, I was tied to a tree and a guy tried to escape. Where is that guy now?
That's
He
what you have to
knows.
deal with. And when
Yeah.
you do that kind of research, you've got to be very careful.
Oh, yeah.
Because
well, it
you're-
sounds like you played it right.
Oh, I did, and I have about 120 letters of his.
Wow.
Single-hand written along with all sorts. That's how I found out that one guard, for instance, at the Christmas, which was totally illegal, put candy bars on some of the prisoners' pillows, just to make it festive.
That's
which
nice.
is totally not. It's totally against the rules and all of that.
I mean, in terms of things that are against the rules, I'd say I'm okay with that one.
Yeah, but that could be counterband. You could smuggle stuff in the candy bars.
They
You
got a
could
lot
use
of contraband in prison.
drugs.
Yeah, how do they get coke in prison?
Well, that's how they have ways. There is
Yeah.
ways, and that's in Alcatraz, which was a solitary confinement, and you could not be sentenced to Alcatraz. You had to commit a crime somewhere else in another big prison and become unruly or a danger, and then they were sent to Alcatraz because at the end of the line, no correspondence, absolute silence.
Similar to Devil's Island, right?
Well,
you
Devil
got
Islands was, we have to be careful. French Guiana was that way. But what French Guiana had a hierarchy in there. For instance, some of the prisoners were made turnkeys. They were the Corsicans. They had power over the other ones. So yeah, there was businesses. They were catching butterflies and selling them, and or some of the better ones became the warden's assistants on. Alcatraz had none of that.
Yeah.
It was just closed down to the
But in
guild.
terms of like going to Devil's Island, was like you had to go to French Guiana first, and then if you were a problem, you got sent to Devil's Island.
No.
No?
There's only 4 people that went to Devil's Island. They were all political prisoners.
So,
And they had over 150,000 prisoners there, so no.
geez, I didn't know only 4 people went to
Yep.
that island,
Yep,
and they all went on that little cable car.
yep,
Huh?
yep. And, okay, those are 4 that were, through sources, or mine include, were identified. So that we can clearly tell that story. I am not so sure that there wasn't 1 or 2 other people sent there because they disappeared.
Well, there's a guillotine there, right?
No, the
that was on
guillotine
El
was not
Royale.
on. That's on Royale. That's on the main island.
Yeah.
So you never really know what went
Right.
on, and it was too complicated and too costly to send someone to Devil's Island because they had to transport the food, and if the weather was bad, no food would come. And they had to exchange the guards that had a guard building.
Yeah, you got to have a guard out there, and
They had the whole guard. They had about 7
it's
guards.
probably
out there.
just as bad to be a guard than
Yes.
as a
Well,
prisoner.
if the guards on Devil's Island were the best, they were the happiest because they weren't confronting with any prisoners. They had their food, they had their isolation, they were private. Other guards, they had to watch their backs. It was a different story.
Interesting.
For them, it was a different story. And the guards that I interviewed, one of the head guards, he was part of the big riot in 1946, where they had to bring in the military to quell it. I became friends with him, and I walked in. Oh, by the way, that's another thing I did. I took a class of my student. We lived on the island for over 2 weeks.
Wow.
In the bottom of the building, we brought
High
all our own
schoolers?
food in there and all. Oh,
High
yeah.
schoolers again?
Yeah, my high school.
Man, your high school class must have been awesome. What's this picture here? Is this from your trip out there to the island?
I don't see what that is.
There's some skulls.
Oh no. That's French Guiana. Yeah,
That's French Guiana.
yeah.
So was that you?
No.
No.
That's a historical excavation that I found, yeah.
So
Well,
Pebble in the Sand, 4 volumes.
So far, I have 4 volumes. I just finished one. It's finished today, but it's not printed, meaning finished. It's all laid out, and the pictures are all in that. That's on Burma. I did a whole thing on Burma. It's a whole other story. I said I laugh because when I start talking, oh, it's Burma. Oh, okay, it's French Guiana. Oh, okay, no, that was Gabon. No, that was Sarawak. No, that was Sulawesi. And it goes on and on and on, and I'm going, there's no end. That's why I have to do that. So I'm going to do 6. And one of the things that I'm told lately, people who are exposed to that, do the last one on all the student stuff that you did.
Oh, that'd be cool.
But here's the issue that I'm concerned with. I have to have written permission of every single one of those students to put them in there, to show the picture.
Yeah.
When we were living off the land in Africa, man, there's all these kids with whatever, and I have to have their permission, and I can't do that. I mean, it's just, that's too complicated.
Yeah.
So someone said, well, what? Just don't give the name, just do initials or first name. Okay, but the picture is there. Not that there is anything that's negative, but you never know who wants. Maybe they want royalties, or maybe they think I'm making a fortune off it.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, so I'm very careful with that. But the
Yeah,
last
that's tough.
volume, somehow I'm gonna involve the projects that I did with the students, which are, some of them are really crazy. You know, one of them, I threw a map on the floor, and every kid threw some pennies on there, and wherever the penny landed, they had to bring me dirt from there. And so this might have been Australia or South America, somewhere. And that's your problem. I want dirt from there. So they had to figure out, to make the contact, to make a connection, they had to figure out how to use the post office, how to register a letter, how to have the dirt identified, and everything was fine. Even the one from Hawaii had to go through the Hawaiian biological earth laboratory for testing so it doesn't get contaminated, and it was in sealed envelopes and all that. It was great. It was great. But
That's pretty cool. What a learning experience, though.
Oh, I did so much with the kids. I launched a hot air balloon off their campus, and my faculty went crazy because I said, well, why are you crazy? Take your math student, figure out how much air I need. Take your English students, have an essay written about that. You know, don't just sit there and, anyway, that's a whole other story.
So I'm sure we've got a ton of questions in the chat, and we want to leave some time for the Q&A. So we do have live chat going on. So Andy, I'm sure we've got tons of questions in there.
Even
Let's hear
people
some
are
of them.
asking questions?
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
this is live. People watching, and they can
Oh, my-
they can ask questions in the chat, and then
Nobody's going to ask questions today.
Yeah, we'll see.
I hope not. Because
Well, good evening, folks. It's great to see your
Probably
smiling
former
faces in
students
chat
and say,
again.
"Hey,
Thank you
what's-"
so much for those who tuned in and for those who had some questions for Pierre. If anyone else has questions, feel free to get them in now. I'm sure we'll be taking questions here for the next little bit. So, first question comes it's actually a comment, comes from C Jungle Charana, who I'm just going to spoil this, is Chuck Jonky, and he wants to say, thanks, Pierre. Fantastic presentation. As usual, you're the best, and I hope to see you soon. Chuck.
Chuck's
That's
been
for
some
you,
places
Pierre.
too.
yeah.
The first question comes from Al Kolos, and Al wants to know, do you think, Pierre, that Alcatraz could be refurbished and reopened?
No, I can't. First of all, materials that were used were with salt water, so deteriorating. That's one of the reasons that they closed it in the first place. Kennedy did that. And also supplying it with fresh water, fresh supplies. It would be a logistical nightmare. And it wouldn't serve any purpose because it's very confined. There's only 120 cells and this. And who would you send there? Criminals who have a record, or teenagers who got caught just because they smoked out? I think it's best left as it is, so you can visit and kind of get an impression on how the laws dealt with crime in those days.
Fair enough. Thanks for the question, and thanks for the answer. Next question is, when you're planning a trip or when you're on an adventure, how do you surmount the language barriers that you find in various countries?
I'm laughing because that is, when I give programs and I talk to people, that is probably the most asked questions. And there's a simple answer. If you know the language, that's fine, you can do it. If you don't know the language, you have the other option, which is the silent language. The silent language consists of body language, of expressions, of hand movements, of knowing a little bit, one or two words that you picked up from the kids or somebody, and definitely knowing their history, so you could point to an object and they will start talking, and then you can start repeating their language. But the main thing is the personal essence of being there. There is something that translates. I'm sure whoever is asking this question will stand somewhere and you'll feel uncomfortable if someone's too close to you because they're invading your space. So that's something you need to consider, and when that space is broken, you can get involved, you can shake hands, and the way you shake the hands, it brings in a smile, and then you build upon that, and you build upon the research that you did of the habits of these indigenous people. And for me personally, it works. For a lot of people, it doesn't work. I will tell you that there are times when I don't bring out the camera until 2 or 3 days when I'm there because it's just not right. I don't get the right vibes for that. But once I pull out that camera, it is amazing how it gets responded to. There was a time when I took a little snap camera and I would just give it to a kid before I even knew who they were and say, go shoot. And then I take the film back and develop it. And then my printer called me up and says, hey, Pierre, I didn't know you were into pornography. I said, what do you mean pornography? I just gave the camera to a little 6, 7-year-old. He was around taking pictures of his parents making love and the pigs and everything. It was just, but it was genuine. It was who they were, and they took that opportunity of having a camera to see through the lens. And so sometimes when I'm in that situation, I'm very careful not to break any personal laws, but it worked. For me, it works, and that's the best way I can explain it, that it's just based on who I am, how I look, and whatever it is.
Yeah. All right, next question, Andy.
Next question comes from Robert Delamotte.
Oh, no.
And Robert wants to know, Pierre, are you related to Colonel Sanders? Asking for a friend.
You did say that it's been a while between haircuts, correct?
Well, Robert saw me when I was with no whatever,
right.
You know. And I don't know how to answer that because I could get really nasty with him. But he he saw me when I was normal. But Robert, on a serious note, it's not pleasant for me to tell you that I was confined to my house since February. And all my outside contacts, the people cutting my hair, the people selling food, they were all in quarantine. And no, I did not take scissors to my own thing. But I tell you what I did for tonight. I did wash my hair, and it's actually combed. So back off, pal. I am okay here.
All right, next question.
When you're planning a trip or when you have a destination in mind, how do you go about planning the trip? What logistics do you consider?
Ooh, that's a broad question. There's many layers. One is always the legal layer. Do I have the right method, or can I get the legal papers to go where I want in these remote areas, number one. Number two, is there transportation that goes there? Number three, do I have someone who can be with me, who understands a culture, who can guide me, which is what I do with all these places. I always have a guide. I interview him for about 2 hours. Make sure he understands I don't want any trinkets, I don't want any women, I don't want any alcohol, and I'm not going to see any waterfalls. And that comment is specifically done for Rick Flores, who always tries to get me to see the next waterfall. So they become very clear as what I want. Now, on the back end of it, if it's a culture that I'm investigating, I go to the bookstores, I buy every single book that I can. I am not quite savvy enough to go to on the internet, so it's still the hard way. Books, reading, research, and sometimes I call an institution where there's an expert on this tribe and try to gather information before I go there. The logistics sometimes are very difficult because you have no transportation, and how are you going to make it? And then you just have to trust yourself that once you're there, you'll go forward.
But you do research your trips
yes.
fairly extensively.
Yes, I do. I do in the best way, but in some areas there's nothing available.
Right.
I just got back from Bangladesh and the east coast or the west coast of Bangladesh, where there's that uproar with the Rohingyas who are being kicked out of Burma. Well, there's not much you can do there. You can't read up on it except political stuff and the conflict. So you have to read through some of what's available and figure out if you want to take the risk or if you feel you have enough information to move on to that. You know, and so that's a reality that now is affecting many parts of the world. You might think you know the culture, but they are in self-defense. When I was in Bangladesh, on that port, there was 250,000 refugees in that camp. I was very tempted to go there, but there's a barbed wire around it, and you aren't going to go there. So you have to be flexible. You can do all the research, and hopefully that helps you. But in some areas, have many surprises.
All right, let's take a couple more questions.
Next question comes from Jeannie AFS, and Jeannie wants to know, how many passports do you have, and what do you travel under?
So yeah, let's. How many different countries' passports do you have, and then how many actually passports have you filled up?
The person asking the question, you're probably from the CIA or the FBI or ISIS or something.
I mean, it's legal to have dual citizenship, right?
No, not in America. I do everything under the American passport. But since you asked a question, I will tell you a story. The passports that I have are the Americans, and they have an expiration date. I built a school in Cambodia. I go there every February. So to me, it's not really a big deal. So I show up at the counter with my passport, and I'm asking for my boarding pass. And the lady looks at my passport and says, you can't go to Cambodia because you have to have at least 6 months after you get there on non-expired. So my passport was 7 months before it expired. So I had already paid for the ticket. I heard all that. So what I did, I walked around the airport and I thought, So that's the only time in my entire life that I pulled out my Swiss passport.
Yeah.
And I presented it to him, okay, you can go. The problem was, how do you get back home? Because if you come back home with a Swiss passport, with American passport, you don't have a stamp that you came from there. So those are some complications. So I advise to only have one passport. I will tell you the richest country in the world, I know you will not know, but I'll tell you, it's Malta. And Malta is the one who sells to $400,000 for the Maltese passport because that opens any country anywhere. And the Russian oligarchs, the illegal people with a lot of money, they buy the Maltese passport, become a Maltese citizen, they're free to travel wherever it is. So if you see an arrest here of some criminals and they pull out the Maltese passport, you know they're into money and they have the connections.
$400,000.
Well, it's more than that. It's
something like that, though.
It's more.
But they'll sell you one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the business. That's the main income for that island.
I do wonder because we've talked about this a couple times. Like I know, so if you come back into the United States, they could surmise that you didn't leave on American passport. Would they necessarily surmise? Because I mean, people do they?
That only happened to me once.
Yeah.
And so when I came back, I just didn't even do it. I just handed them the American passport, and they asked me, "Where do you come from?" Oh, I just came back from Canada, and that was it.
Yeah. Because I mean, if I went to Mexico, they're not stamping my passport on the end, but they want to see it on the way back.
Yes.
So
now it's a different story. Now things have changed so dramatic. So what I'm talking about is my many years of doing it, which does not apply to today. And today I would be doing things differently or approach it differently. And there's maybe in my 30, 40 years, maybe 4 times where I crossed the border with no paperwork, especially when I drove my vehicle from Venice, Italy to Beijing, China. And I passed all of these countries, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and all.
Yeah.
So there were times where you just have a cup of coffee and you smile and you move on.
All right, we got another question.
Final question of the night is, do you have any fun stories of adventure with other members of the Adventurers Club?
Yes, I do. My mantra is I travel alone. And the people I travel with now is only one person. I don't want to say he's been tested, but we did several trips together where we are totally simpatico, where he supports me. I wanted to see a prison on an island in Costa Rica, And he was totally not interested. I says, okay, if you back me on that prison, I will back you on hiking up to all these mountains to see all these animals and wait patiently until you take pictures of butterflies and birds. So that happened. There are other times. There was one time where 4 of us as club members went on a trip to Africa. And then there's 1 or 2 other people, one person in particular that I did several trips with, but that person turned out to be totally negative because he says, where are you taking me next? And I said, I'm not taking you somewhere. Or he would exaggerate of what really happened. So if we were stopped by a guy with his police uniform asking for papers, when the story came out, oh, we were stopped by a guy with a 400 millimeter gun standing there, and I'm not that. That's not me. So with that person, I severed all relationship because all the stories that we had together, good, bad, or indifferent, all of a sudden they become exaggerated, and it gives you a reputation that you're bullshitting or you're exaggerating. And I will not embellish any stories on anything I do, no matter how tempting it is.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. And unfortunately, there's some people who have different agendas. Or you take them on a long trip I took them up to internal part of Altai or in China, and there wasn't even a thank you after putting all my cards on the table, all my connection, because a lot of these areas now, I travel by connections. They know me and they support me. And so when I bring someone else in, sometimes it's awkward because they don't know how to behave or they whatever.
Right.
So I travel alone, and I broke that promise because I'm traveling with this one guy wherever we go, and that's it. But no, I wouldn't. I did take a person to Cambodia because they were helping me when I was building my school, and I just thought that would be appropriate. And that person turned out to be great because she was into the kids and she was supporting and she was helping clean up the mess. She was part of that school that I built. It wasn't just a looky-loo. And that turned out okay. But other than that, no.
Lone wolf.
Well,
if you want to go fast, go alone, right?
Well, not only fast, but you want to be responsible, because if I have to wait for you to make a decision, that might spoil everything. Or you might say something wrong. Sometimes you have to matter. But mainly, I hate to be taken advantage of. And when I give you something, I give it from my heart or my connections in this case. I introduce you to some women who helped me out in the middle of the field of Mongolia. And I don't want someone to say, hey, did you get laid by her or whatever? That's not it. But if that's who you are, I just don't want to be involved with that.
Yeah, you got to be careful about who your travel partners are,
Well,
for sure.
but you never know, and I started out because I tell you, the first travel I did with someone was from the Adventure Club. We went down to the Copper Canyon, and it was great. He died, unfortunately. I had to go back and bail him out and bring some film down and all that. But he was the right guy. He had the right attitude.
Yeah.
That's Emil Barjak, by the way. He's long dead, but he had empathy for the people, and he has respect for the people, and he was not showing off.
Yeah.
But no, basically, I'm a lone wolf.
Well, hey, Pierre, thank you for coming by. We appreciate you
You're
coming
welcome.
and sharing your stories of adventure. They're
You're welcome.
amazing stories, and that's what the club's about, right?
Yep, that's what the club's about. And if they want to find out more about the two topics we talked about, go to my webpage and you will find how to get involved with that.
Yeah, and these, I thumbed through these books, and they look amazing.
Thank you.
Lots of cool
Yeah,
stories.
well, these are the property of the club now.
Yeah, and also,
Thank you.
when we open back up, if you're a member, you can come in and check out our library, and these books will be in there. I don't know where they'll be shelved. We don't necessarily use the Dewey Decimal System or anything, but they'll be in there. I'm sure you'll be able
As
to
long
find
as
them.
they don't disappear, because there's about 15 of my books who were here for you guys to sell. They all disappeared.
They're probably in a drawer somewhere.
Yeah, you hope so.
They may be in there in this box or something.
Well, thank you for asking me back. It took a lot for me to come here because I was confined and I was just not in the mood, but it turned out great. Thank you.
Great.
I
Thank you. I'm
appreciate
glad
it.
you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So next week, guys, we have Matt Allison coming in to talk about herding reindeer, another Siberia trip.
I know, it's great.
So the guy went up to Siberia and herded some reindeer with some
Inuits, with the
Inuits or net nets.
Nets, Inuits.
Yeah. So it's going to be a cool program next week. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next week.